Welcome back, everyone. It is Wins Above Fantasy episode one. Where are we at, Steve? 156.
156.
Yeah, if you can't tell, Steve, I'm a little more checked out than you as you're in your home league finals, and I got the bump in the semis, but we got a great show. Looking back a little bit at 2024, you could call some of these guys busts or disappointments, but we are taking a list and looking at potential bounce backs for 2025. It is a fascinating topic and one that I personally always shop from this group of names of, who's coming at a discount compared to what they've been the past several years. And we've got a great table. I know there's been some back and forth on Twitter with Ryan Bloomfield. Shout out, of course, Bubba in the Bloom Pod at Ryan BHQ. Everybody knows the Bloom boards. And we got a fun one that if you guys are following on the stream, we will have that pulled up. And if you're joining us on the pod, welcome. Thursday, September 19th. And Steve, it's a good time of year. There's a lot of crossroads of sports and interests and weather changing. But congratulations to you for still being alive. I won't say anything beyond that. But how's it going over there, man? Feel free to knock on wood as you talk this whole show. But I know that you're in the home league final, man. It's the holy grail.
Yeah, it's great. And I think I've mentioned it, but we do a 2-week final. So like it does take a little bit of the randomness and luck out for a final. I know even in the semifinals and quarterfinals for head to head, there is, you run into a hot week. That's kind of it. And people get upset, and it is what it is, over the course of the season and head to head, right? Like this cream tends to rise to the top, and you kind of can overcome, if you have a good team, you overcome the unlucky weeks, quote unquote. But in the playoffs, it is a second, it is the nature of it. And I know the downside, and I know why people like Roto for that, but the management of the matchups week to week and just the thrill of like watching your at bats versus one opponent's at bats.
You can't beat
there's
it.
nothing like that for me, at least in fantasy. It's still the best feeling, screaming when your guy hits a home run in the finals and, living and dying with every pitch. We do that all year, but at least for me, it's been, I think it's been like 4 or 5 years since I've been in my main home league, which is, it's a hefty buy-in, and it's a lot of people that care, and it's hard. Players are all sharp. I know industry leagues have their challenges, but to do it with people that like half of my league was in my wedding, it's just the thrill of that is why we play this game and why I do the show, why you do this show. It's just the best. Like the gut wrenching feeling is the best gut wrenching feeling when you're going through it. I know it's a soft spot since you were just eliminated, and
no, but I totally agree, man. I mean, and I'm the commissioner of a 23-year home league, so like the lore is huge too. I mean, it's like we issue the stars next to the team names for each title. It's like, it's a big deal. So yeah, we are. WAF Nation is pulling for you, Steve, with the exception of maybe some of your home league that tunes in that might be antagonist on it. But it's a great show, Steve. And we were talking about, where do we go from here? We did the, we did kind of second half breakouts for hitters, for pitchers. And then this is almost the flip where we're still looking for value. We're still looking, of course, for players that we're interested in kind of too early season. We're not a month, 6 weeks out from some of those too early mock drafts. And yeah, it's always exciting when you get into that last couple of weeks of the season, because you start looking at the stat lines and it's pretty dang close to what is going to be on the back of the baseball card, which is when you can start assessing how this guy did against their expectations, go look back at ADP. And then the very next thing your brain goes to is, all right, is this second rounder now a fourth rounder or a fifth rounder, and start to calibrate, which is really one of the best parts about doing this show in general for me. Is what used to be like January 1, where I started locking in on my mental preferences and who guys were or what values I liked. Now I roll straight into it. So there's really not too much time for me to wallow over here in my home league sadness. But this show is one of the early ones where it's really focused on value. And I think he pulled up a great, timely Bloom board to go with it. So again, shout out to Ryan Bloomfield. But talk to me about the topic in general. And I guess, Steve, I missed it last week. So before we get into that, I should drop a host moment here. That in addition to all our listeners, who you guys can follow us on Twitter at Wins Above Pod, give us a YouTube follow as well, because Wins Above Fantasy is doing the live streams now. Steve does a great job. We got a nice little design template. You can see our mugs talking through this stuff, and Steve pulls up some nice charts as we talk about these guys. So join us. You guys can leave comments. We're down to clowning here. So yeah, just wanted to plug that because we saved it till the very end last podcast. But yeah, talk to me about the podcast and also just the topic for tonight.
Yeah, it's a big initiative here for the podcast network at Pitcher List. We're rolling out video for all of our shows, and YouTube is going to be the center. Like each show's YouTube is going to be the center for all things video for our live streams. So hope to get that more involved and get more of a following there and more interaction throughout the off season as we roll these things out. So it's an exciting time. I know we've been doing sort of streams on and off basically the whole year. And it's been a lot of fun. So be sure to follow us there. Shout out to Josh Sperry, who's does a lot of the behind the scenes work with the video and these design templates that are really cool. So yeah, follow our show, any Pitcherless show, tune in for those streams. We'll mostly be live during the season, at least on Wednesday nights. That can change, but we'll give heads up when we do go live in the off season, when we switch to the off season schedule. So yeah, exciting stuff. Be sure to follow Wins Above Fantasy PL on YouTube. There you go. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited to roll it out.
Absolutely.
As far as the show goes, this idea came to me when I was listening to a recent episode of the Bubba and Bloom. I think it was last week, so like the week of September 9th. And Ryan Bloomfield at Ryan BHQ started to talk about his process and getting ready for the offseason, how it becomes a super busy time for him because he is a part of Baseball HQ that produces the Baseball Forecaster, like any fantasy nerd's Bible. I get that every single year. Make sure you copy of that. It is an essential tool. I think it's just a great collector's item too for a fantasy baseball nut like we are, just to have all those forecaster years. And he talks about how when he does get into prep mode and putting together projections for next season, he likes to look at 3-year average for all stats. And he thinks that the most recent year gets weighted far too heavily. And I think that's a process that I like to follow and a sort of pillar of my research and off-season prep that I tend to lean on. And I think that's a great way to find bounce back hitters. And just to be clear, this is a Stav board. This is a ripoff of the Bloom board, but I made this board. So it was inspired by Bloomfield. And I'm glad you thought it was a Bloom board because his boards always look so good. So, shout out to Ryan. Make sure you give Bubba and Bloom a follow. Listen to their podcast. It's great. All of Ryan's work is great. Bubba hosts the First Pitch podcast here on Pitcher List every single night. He does that. He does Bench with Bubba. He does Bubba and the Bloom. That guy busts his butt and produces great fantasy content every single night. Dude, we get worn out doing the show once a week, and sometimes it's a struggle thinking.
Dude, and he's over there. He's over there guesting with Ina or with DVR on Rates and Barrels. His free time is serving the fantasy community. So,
yeah. So shout out to Bubba. Shout out to Ryan. Those guys just are, and they're super nice guys too. They're this industry really is great, and those guys are two examples of it. Maybe we'll try to get both of them on the show at some point in the offseason.
That's a good show.
A nice collaboration there. So yeah, there you go, Ryan and Bubba. There's your formal invite to WAF. I know Ryan said he'd be tuning in at some point tonight. So this is a fun topic, and I'm excited to get into it And on the stream, I figure, hey, we can get right into it and start talking about this list and sort of what we did to compile these guys, right?
Yeah. If you pull it up, we got the list here, and it is the past 3 years, like Steve was saying, which was inspired by Ryan's take on that. And we're looking at 2022, 2023, and 2024. And this
So
is
it's inclusive
WRC
of
plus.
this year, right? Like that's
Yes,
important. Like
inclusive.
we're counting what players have done this year. So it's not like,
Correct.
yeah.
And you added the column to average these out. So we're looking at WRC plus, and then how we're basically the leaderboard is constructed is the average WRC plus of the past 3 years minus their WRC plus this year. So we're seeing basically what's the gap between their past 3-year average versus what we just saw in 2024. And what it spits out, as you would expect, is a handful of names that are widely understood to have underperformed this year versus what we've come to expect from these guys over the past 3 years. And some of them are, staples to your offense, like your top 3 or 4 hitters. Other ones are deeper down the board, but guys who were starting to put together a lot of exciting, taking the leap from an ADP 160 down to around 100, 110. So kind of that middle part of your batting order for fantasy. But yeah, Steve, it's a big range here. And I know we've pulled out about 8 names that really jumped out, but anything you want to add to kind of the top of the waves here in terms of what you saw when you were doing this poll, any things that we should be considering as we talk through it? Fire away.
No, it was kind of hard to remind myself like that. And I said it and I interrupted you when we were doing the intro, but like anyone that's had a down year, like that's included in their average. Like one of the first guys we'll talk about, like despite being a league average hitter this year, on the whole over the last 3 years has been 32% better than league average. Like that's still really good. And I think is a good indicator as sort of a back of the napkin math rule of thumb. Hey, if you buy from this list at a discount, you're probably going to hit more often than not. I would think, just based on track record and just based on who these guys are and what they've done. And guys have down years. Like that was the impetus for what Ryan's Bloomfield point was when he said he looks at 3 years average. Like it happens. Guys have really good years. Guys have bad years. It's probably going to come back to someone in the middle of what they've done over the last 3 years in a track record. So
yeah,
I think there'll be some good names to buy from this list.
The one other thing to note is if you look at top performers from this year, some of them, had we done this show last year, might have popped up that you're like, oh yeah, a friendly reminder, Jose Ramirez is elite, not like falling out of the first round.
Yeah.
He is an absolute stud. Another like Machado is another one, or Francisco Lindor, where it's like, yeah, there might be kind of winds of change where one season and the next. Vlad's another one who kind of put it all together, even though he was a late second rounder this past year. Now he's put in basically a top 15 season. You get the idea, but it's
like Judge would have been a good one. Like
exactly
his 2-year average was, 189 WRC plus from 22 and 23, right? It's like, he missed time. Yeah, it was slightly down year from when he hit 62 homers or whatever it was, but he's still Aaron Judge, right? Yeah. So like the opposite end of this list too. Like Francisco Lindor, I think is a good example of that.
Yeah.
Teoscar Hernandez, I think
that's a really good one.
Like these guys are good. Vlad, I think is. Yes, he had the down year last year, and I think it was a big reason why I wasn't on it, but he was still 25% better than league average in 22 and 23 on average.
Yep. So to jump right in, Steve, the name that I almost picked out just because I was, for my selfish reasons, wanted to dig in and say, am I in or out on this guy? Because I feel like he's been polarizing from day one in a sense, or at least volatile from day one. And it's Michael Harris, second. Who is the number 2 biggest faller on his past 3-year WRC plus versus what he did this year. When he kind of broke into the league, we all remember that crazy second half season. 137 WRC plus, last year a 115, and then this year an 82 WRC plus. So he's number 2 on the list. We'll get to number 1, don't worry. What we saw from MH2 this year, a 246 average, a 665 OPS, 12 homers, 9 steals. Now, he had a hamstring issue in June that was originally like a 10-day, moved to a 60-day. So he's only got 100 games under his belt. So you kind of look at that and like, yes, the slash line is ugly, but 100 games, 12 homers, 9 steals. Like right away, I said, if that's like the floor, and we know that he's still like 23 years old, there's got to be plenty of reasons to justify the upside here for a bounce back. And the argument kind of further reinforced as I started looking more and more under the hood. For one, the power started to come through in August and September. We saw 7 homers from MH2, and that was in 130 at bats compared to the 5 homers he had in his first 260 at bats. So again, in half of the amount of at bats there, he had 7 homers versus 5. The speed being down a little bit is concerning, but when you have a hamstring injury, I'm always willing to just throw that out. It's not like he's slowing down as a 23-year-old. 9 steals in 100 games still isn't anything to sneeze at, but when you look at like his sprint speed and everything, it's still good, and that's on a bad hammy season. So I'm still counting on him to be a 20 steal guy easily, health pending. And yeah, the power looked encouraging. Just looking at like some of the other things, pitcher list on his pitcher list player page, hard contact, he was 31st overall in the majors. So yeah, this whole thing, like remembering what we saw last year, the year before, was a 297 average when he broke through and a 293 last year. We kind of banked on him being a 2020 guy. And yeah, I just really think he might fall to like the 5th round, somewhere between, again, just kind of crystal ball, pick 55, pick 70, somewhere in there. And I think he has every chance to go out, hit 270, 25 is not out of the question. And the Braves were just plagued, man. This whole list has Braves everywhere. So if the Braves have a normal bounce back year, his counting stats could be amongst the best in the majors. So I really like Michael Harris II as a nice bounce back next year. It'll just be really interesting to see where the ADP falls. So what are your thoughts on Harris, Steve?
Do you remember Michael Harris's start to the 2023 season? Any idea what his slash line was on June 1st?
I think it was pretty cold because my brother drafted him and was complaining. He was like, when you had him, when he broke through, he was on fire. Now he sucks. So what was it like? Did he bat in like 220?
He slashed through June 1st in 123 plate appearances, 174, 260, 266 for a 526 OPS, 45 WRC plus. He had 2 homers and 5 steals. Michael Harris was dropped.
He was on that's right. He was on the wire in a lot of leagues
early in 2023. And this reminds me of a point that Saris, obligatory Saris of The Athletic, mentioned on our weekly episode, brought up on a recent episode of Rates and Barrels when talking about Julio Rodriguez. He's on this list, but not on our list that we're going to talk about. Guys with streaky players, when you throw in an injury, that could mess up a full season. Like Julio starts slow. Like as soon as he was getting hot this year, he had that injury and missed a few weeks in August. Harris seems to be sort of a similar case. He seems to be a slow starter. He started off slow this year, had a hamstring injury. If that injury is happens when a hot streak starts for a guy that, like a Julio Rodriguez can hit 400 with 12 homers in a month.
Right.
A guy like Michael Harris that could turn a 174 average on June 1st into a 290 average by the end of the year. Like, come on. Like if an injury happens to a guy that gets that scorching hot at a bad time, like that's going to lead to a down year, and why it's important to look at these stats in a broader sense and, weigh not only this year, but the previous years as well, to determine a player's true skill level. And if that's much higher than what a player did this year, I think Michael Harris. If he fall, it's
I
hard
think he
for
will.
guys that have
I think he
power
will.
and speed to fall too far, though. That's my one thing. Like he's still going to have 15 homers and 10 steals. Oh, he was caught 6 times, but hey, with the hamstring injury, who knows what the case is there.
Mhm,
Maybe he
mhm.
will fall. I feel like, before the analytical era and before like the age of fan graphs and picture list and when everyone and their mother had a fantasy baseball podcast in their mother-in-law's basement, like yours truly.
He would have fallen farther, you think, back in
Yeah,
the day?
yeah. Now I think he will fall. You're right. I don't think it's going to be like, oh my God, got Michael Harris in the 15th round or 12th round. Like, maybe it's like round 8 or 10 or something like that. Pick 100, pick 120.
I don't think it'll go that far.
You don't think it'll go that far? Okay.
No, I
Yeah.
think he'll be at the latest like a 6th rounder.
I think
But
so too.
I still think that's value,
Yeah.
man. He
Yeah.
was the end of the 2nd round this year.
And he was like the end of the 2nd round the year before him, provided to be a value, right? Like he had 18
Right.
homers, 20 steals with an 808 OPS, and a 293 average. So yeah,
Mhm.
I'm with you on that. And I think that if he does fall around like 6, 7, that'll be a value.
Yeah, and I mean, it is possible, and in some draft rooms, because now, like, the sheen has kinda worn off a little bit on, like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It takes one down year for people to kinda move, and steals are a lot more plentiful around the league, so when people see only 9
And he does
and,
seem more of like a 20-25 guy than like a 35-40 guy, right?
right, yes, he's not of that ilk that's
Hmm.
like, yeah, that the total power speed guys. He's like power speed, B grade power speed. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think still the overall fantasy profile and the fact that he could get better. What happens when he doesn't have that cold
Hmm.
streak?
Hmm.
If there's a season
Or
where it
just
all clicks.
makes it not as cold, right?
Yeah,
Like, or
exactly.
only as bad in April, not April and May.
Yep. So that's Michael Harris second. Love that one, Steve. If you want to fire off on the first one that you threw out here.
Yeah, this is someone that I wanted to talk about. I talked about him tonight in the Pitcherless Discord with Kyle Bland and a few others. There's your PL Pro drop. Be sure to sign up for PL Pro. You get access to the Discord, chat with everyone on the Pitcherless team and all the community. It's amazing. I cannot recommend it enough. I would recommend it if that's all you got access to. But on top of that, you get access to all the PL Pro tools, PL Bot, like the streaming bot, that's done
Mhm.
an amazing job this year and has given some amazing calls and like under the radar calls that I've followed in my fantasy playoffs for my home league and streams that have worked out really well. So shout out to Kyle, shout out to PL Pro. Be sure to sign up for that. But that's Adley Rutschman. And I want to bring up a tweet from Avi Miller. He's at AVIMIIIIER. So I think like the L's are I's. He put out a tweet on 9/10, so a few weeks ago, or about a week ago, about how Adley got hit with a foul ball. It was a Marcus Simeon foul ball in the hand when he was catching on 6/27. And as a righty, before June 27th, he had a 213 WRC plus. Post June 27th, as a righty, he has a 67 WRC plus.
Ooh.
And I am also going to bring up what Kyle in the Pitcherless Discard and also tweeted out. What lines up with that injury is Adley Rutschman's process plus, which weights decisions, contact, and power. And his tweet was, "See if you could spot 627 on this graph." And essentially, from 627 was his high point, and where he was having this amazing season. Like Adley's been so bad over the last few months. He was so good. Like he looked like one of the best catchers for fantasy in recent memory. And then it all changed from when he got hit on the hand. I'm not saying that is the sole reason. There probably was some regression that was due whether he got hurt or not, but he's clearly paying hurt or not. Like you could point to that date as a righty or not. Like who knows how it's messing with him from when he's a lefty. Being a catcher and having the hit is hard enough. Having to do it with what could be a broken finger or broken hand, or at least a really badly hurt hand, I'm sure is not easy, but I think just looking at Adley and pointing to this injury and seeing how it ties to his production, falling off a cliff, and then looking at how good Adley Rushman has been over the last 3 years, where he had a 135 WRC plus, a 127 WRC plus, and then is down to a 107 this year. I think that's fair to project a bounce back once he gets healthy next year. And if he isn't drafted as like a top 5 catcher, like, maybe I'll fall off my no early catcher bandwagon and jump on Adley, because he was just so good before he got hurt.
Yeah. I mean, I remember because that was, I forget if it was you or our PitchCon guest who had thrown out Adley as a fade on the chalkboard, but we thought that was dead in the water because
I think it might have been me. Yeah.
Because the 10 homers between April, May, it looked great. And then, it just second half, it's the 202 average, 590. And as a catcher, and a very good defensive catcher as well, he's probably just trying to help the team by staying on the field, even if the bat is suffering a little bit. So, I think it's valid. And for a guy that's been like, this is a WRC plus of him in the majors, but it's not like he was some pop-up catcher. Like, we knew Adley was going to be generational.
Yeah.
So I think that's totally valid. And I think, again, because he carries the C, and people have the philosophy on fading catchers in a lot of leagues. I know sometimes certain leagues that flips, but I think we're going to see a big discount for Adley, who went ADP 52 this season. You can almost double it, right? Because people are not going to look in that deep and just chalk it up as like, oh yeah, I don't want to burn a top 7 round pick on a catcher who underperformed. So I agree, Steve. I think it's a great one. And so that's, let's see.
Through June 27th, he had a 300, 351, 479 slash line with 15 homers. From that date on, he has been essentially like a league average catcher.
This is one that as soon as the season's over, you're going to hear the report. You're going to hear the, you know what I mean? The interview or something. And then all in the off season, he's probably going to be talking about how it was bugging him. It just seems like too much of a coincidence.
From June 27th on, he is hitting 188, 285, 294 with a 68 WRC plus, and has only 5 homers. Like, he was on pace for like a 30 homer, 850 OPS season from the catcher. And essentially he hasn't even been a replacing catcher. Like, you don't roster a catcher that's that bad. Like, even in a 2-catcher league, right? Like, Adley Rushman has barely been good enough for a 2-catcher league. Like, the only thing keeping him around is the playing time. The fact that he's played 62 games since June 27th.
Yeah. And I mean, name value aside, he would fall much further in draft rooms, but I still would be shocked if he's, if we're at like pick 120 and Adley's still on the board, just because of the, who he is and the pedigree and all that stuff. So that's Adley, and he on the list, just because we were talking. So he's about top 15 in terms of the WRC plus drop this year versus the 3-year average.
He is 19th.
Okay, there you go. So we got a handful of other names, guys, but we got to take our first ad break. We'll be right back after this. So Steve, we kind of teased the number 1 drop or faller on this, and if you're listening, take a guess, but it is none other than Paul Goldschmidt, who I was all over in the offseason, because I thought what we saw last year with the 25 homers and the 268 average, I thought that was the down year, but we saw even more of a down year, even though he has picked it back up considerably compared to the first 2 months of the season, which, Steve, firsthand as well. But Goldie's sitting at a 244 average, 21 homers, 10 steals. It's a 714 OPS, and with a I guess we'll call it an offense there in St. Louis. It has been 60 RBIs, 64 runs. A prime reason why I'm not following September baseball as closely as usual. But Goldie, if you look, I mean, and all jokes aside, this year was age 37 season. And for a guy that we kind of have said, he defies a lot of the, like, age is just a number. He's been an Iron Man. He's missed no more than a handful of games, dating all the way back to like 2014. Some of the stuff under the hood still looks pretty good. I mean, the barrel rate, 10.5%. That's not bad. The hard hit rate is great at 50%. That's 93rd percentile in the league. And overall for Goldie, like we said, it started so poorly that you kind of have to remind yourself that at the end of May, we were looking at a 650 OPS, somewhere in that range. And in the second half, he's jumped his average up from 230 to 272, his OPS from 664 to 807. So things are moving in the right direction for Goldschmidt, and he's still running with 10 steals. So it's not all lost for the Goldschmidt truthers, but he's going to be 38 years old. I think because of that, because of how brutal the Cardinals have been, because of just the 2 year in a row decline for Goldschmidt, we're going to see this ADP fall like a landslide from pick 80 where it was this year to, we're probably talking triple digits and beyond, which I got to say, I can't quit, man. If he's going somewhere in like the 10th round, I'm not going to let him get past me. So talk to me about Goldschmidt. You threw him on the list. Are you optimistic like me, or you have doubts here?
I think I'm optimistic like you. Like, the season was bad and people were drafting him to be, a top 10, top 15 first baseman, even after, like you said, somewhat of a down year after the MVP year in 2022. But it's not that bad. Like, it's the 19th rated first baseman on the Fangraphs player rater.
Right.
The 21 homers, 10 stolen bases, maybe that'll get closer to, the 35 combined between in the next week and a half if he still continues to stay hot like he has been in September. Yeah, I expect the downfall, but the skills don't imply a downfall this harsh, right? Like, I still think he is a 260 to 275 hitter that could hit 25 to 30 home runs. The fact that he could still throw in 10 steals is really, really nice. Like, still hits the ball hard. He hits the ball harder than he was hitting it in his MVP season in 2022. And I know that's not everything. And, the chase rate and swing strike rate and strikeout rates are up across the board. The barrel rate's still really good, but it's down from the 12%. And 14% it was like his second peak, right, from like the 2021 2022 years, when he won that MVP and had back-to-back 30 homer seasons. So I don't know if he'll ever be the top 5 first baseman again, but I think he can definitely be like a top 10. He's a free agent, so I'm interested to see where he goes next year. But I still like Goldschmidt. I think he'll be a great, like, oh crap, I need a first baseman here, or a first corner infield guy in like deeper 15 team leagues. The skills are still good, despite the fact that Goldschmidt's 37. I hope he doesn't retire. Goldschmidt's one of my favorite players from the last, decade.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, beyond that, he's been 13 years.
Right. When he came to St. Louis, I think he felt he was joining a team that would compete and make deep runs into the playoffs. So I feel like for his career, he's got to be like yearning for some meaningful, playoff baseball. And so I think, yeah, we'll see where he lands. But to me, I think there's still some time left. I mean,
I hope he doesn't retire. I really hope he doesn't.
And he
retire.
just sorry, I misspoke earlier because he just turned 37. So
okay,
next
so
year will be his age 37
okay.
season.
Okay.
Which is a little bit better. But yeah, I think yeah, we'll see. I still believe in him as a professional in terms of the durability.
As a
It was a
Cardinals fan,
dumpster.
would you want him back on a 1-year deal?
No, we're all just clamoring to blow the whole thing up.
Got
Just
it.
blow it up, and including like front office, like that. For the first time in a long time, like attendance is like
Really?
grave. Oh yeah, like there was a game the other day. I was just talking to a client of mine at work, but there was a game the other day that was like weekend home game, and I think they said the ticket sales were a little bit higher, but it was like 15% capacity. And it's like, dude,
Wow.
that's unheard of. Like for decades running, Busch has been a top 5 attendance spot. And it's like right now there's and the Cubs have been lackluster too. So like the baseball scene right now is dire in central Illinois for sure. But yeah, I want Goldschmidt to have meaningful baseball, and the Cards just need to look at the youth and go from there. So yeah, I think you're right, Steve. Parachute first base, corner infield, and yeah, number 1 biggest faller. But I think that speaks to how good he's been, even as recent as last year. So let's jump over to another corner here, Austin Riley, who is smack dab in his prime, but we saw pretty much a disappointing year for Riley. Now the power has improved compared to April and May when he had just 3 home runs combined. Then he kind of got back to like tried and true 30 homer pace where it was 6 in June, 5 in July, 5 in August, and then fractured his hand midway through August. So really untimely. But talk about under the hood numbers. This guy still has like top batted ball data to where when you look at just since he's turned a corner with the strikeout rate 4 or 5 years ago, this guy is a set it and forget it. And I don't think anything's really changed other than the fact that the injury came at an unfortunate time. The average dropped a little bit down to 256 compared to where he's been like a 270 guy since he figured out the plate discipline stuff. But even the other stuff, like there's the hard hit rate actually went up to a career best this year. And his home run to fly ball dropped from what's a career clip of 20% down to 14%. So a little bit unlucky there. But this is one kind of like we talked about with Michael Harris, where second rounder this year probably will be 4th. I actually heard Ryan Bloomfield talk about that he thinks he'll be like a 4th round guy. I agree with that. And honestly, Steve, if he's there with third base, like I would love to have him as a 3rd or 4th hitter.
I don't think he'll make it to the 3rd round. I think that's maybe where he went in like
to the 3rd.
Oh, sorry, to the 4th round. To the 4th round.
Yeah.
I think he went in the 3rd or 4th round in that too early meatball draft that we've been talking about that went on a few weeks ago. But yeah, like this is a guy that the industry's too sharp now. The underlying data is too good. Like Austin Riley is still amazing, and just had a slow start to the season, and an untimely injury, like we talked about with Julio, and like we talked about with Michael Harris. So yeah, the Braves have shout out to them for still being in the playoff race. They have had pretty much everything that could go wrong has gone wrong for them. So including Austin Riley, but I still really, really like Riley. Like the barrel rate is still elite. The hard hit rate, like you said, is elite. Riley, I think, is a true talent second rounder. Like I think he is a 270, 40 homer, 100 type of guy, considering the lineup context and his batted ball skills. So that in my mind is a 2nd round player. So if there's any discount on that, I think you're getting a steal.
Yeah. I mean, I would be surprised just for the names that have jumped up. I think he'll be pushed out of the 2nd round for sure.
Sure. Yeah.
When you just look at like even like Ketel Marte will probably go ahead of him, right? Guys like that.
I'd take Riley over Marte.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's fair because I would probably bet on the finish being there. But from the season we just saw, it'll be interesting when people look up and see, 19 homers, a 256 average. Am I willing to spring there? But I think if you're looking at process over just baseball card, back of the baseball card, yeah, it's hard to argue. He's top 5, top 10 power guy in the league. I wanted to point out Jose Altuve as well here, Steve.
I like it.
15th on this list in terms of fallers. And this was one that was coming in at kind of an interesting profile to begin with, because we saw just 90 games last year from Altuve, and the homer pace at 17 was exceptional. A 915 OPS, 17 homers, 14 steals last year in just 90 games. So we were really in on Altuve. I think we actually talked about loving him at like the 2-3 turn. And then this year he's put in a full body of work, but he hit just 2 more homers than last year. So that's really dragged down the OPS from 915 down to 796. But he's still hovering right around a 300 average. And the speed is what's really fascinating for the 34-year-old. We saw his steals up as high as it's been since 2017. The most times he's been caught since 2016. So he's just running like crazy. And then the fact that his sprint speed improved overall, it's just like, leave it to Altuve to just keep us guessing at like where the value will come through. But if you're talking about a 300 2020 guy, I didn't even know necessarily how you call it a bounce back, because he delivered value this year. It's just, it dropped off compared on a WRC plus compared to last year and the year before. Do you think Altuve is still like an early mid 3rd round guy, or like where do you peg this like future Hall of Famer? It's just so hard to kind of figure out how much of a fixture he is at the top of your team's roster.
I don't think he is. I think he may fall to like that 5, 6, 7 range, like pick, 75, pick, 60, something like that. And I think that there's a buying opportunity. I think that the fantasy baseball community is ageist, and any bit of a downfall, and I would qualify a 114 point drop in OPS, a 25 point drop in WRC plus as a slip up for a 34-year-old that's been around forever and has played a bunch of games and has some questions around his power and speed. I think that that's the type of player that the community misprices. And I think that's the type of player that I like to buy. Like I think Altuve is like the kind of like a David Ortiz type, where like he is going to be good until he retires. That's just who Jose Altuve is. And I'm willing to hitch my wagon to Jose Altuve basically every year. And I'll be in on him, even if I think it's more of like a 20, 25, like one way or the other, home runs or steals. Stealing, he's going to hit close to 300. He's going to get a lot of runs and RBIs, or a lot of runs at least. Like, the Astros started off so slow too in the beginning of the year. If there's any change to that, he'll probably have an overall better counting stats. So I like Altuve, and I think there is going to be a bit of a price drop, and I think it's a good buying opportunity, especially using this 3-year weighted average WRC plus. And you can go back even further than that for Altuve.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's another thing. Like the industry is ageist, and it's also, and not just kind of the content creators, if you will, but the average fantasy baseball fan is now privy to, the savant tools, the pitcher list pages, the red or blue sliders, right? And Altuve's one that at a glance looks like
he never
right,
is a
like the StatCast darling.
He's never a
right?
StatCast darling.
Yeah. Like in 2022, he had a 269 batting average and a 300 a 269 XBA, a 300 batting average. In 2023,
he's just always going to outperform that. Yeah,
a 245 XBA and a 311 average, and we saw the same thing this year. So at a glance, it's like it looks like it's more of a lucky season than what, the way he just gets the most out of his skills and the pull power, all that stuff. So yeah, I like Altuve. Gosh, if it is 6th, 7th round, I'm all over that, because I think I still trust him as like a 4th, 5th round talent. So yeah, I'll probably have a lot of shares. We're going to round out with a couple more names here, going deeper down the list, but we got to take our second ad break, and we'll be right back after this. So Steve, moving out to your neck of the woods with Gleyber Torres. He's not like a spring hen anymore. Like it's crazy to look up and see that Gleyber is 28 when it feels like yesterday that he was like this prospect breaking through. Everyone had huge expectations, and he's kind of had an up and down career. Last year, it looked like it was finally coming back around to where he had a 273 average, 25 homers, 13 steals. And it seemed like even at his ADP, that was a discount and then if you said that the Yankees would have the season that they've been having, you wouldn't expect Torres to have such a drop off. But a 255 average, 14 homers, 4 steals, it's been just a bad down year for Torres. And it begs the question, for what we've seen in the years prior, is this in the same breath as a lot of the other names we've been talking about? Because this was the first one where I kind of got some pause, and I was like, man, I don't know if I'm going to be like pouncing for a bounce back on Gleyber, just because I feel like I don't know exactly who he is, like Goldie or like Altuve. It's just been kind of topsy turvy. But talk to me about your take on Gleyber, and if there's a bounce back opportunity here.
Yeah, I think there is, and I think the reason why it may not be as obvious is because I don't know if his ceiling is as high as the other guys we've talked about. Just based on this exercise, Gleyber Torres is WRC plus over the last 3 years: 115, 121, 102 this year. So, like, if there is a bounce back, it's bounce back to a player that's like 15 to 20% better than league average, and a guy that's a 265, 325, 450 slug guy with 20-ish homers and maybe 8 to 10 steals, right? It's not the high-end guys that we've been talking about, but that's still a useful fantasy second baseman. Like, if he puts in the 2 years that he did in 2022 and 2023, like, I'm happy with where he was drafted this year. He's going to be drafted much lower than that. And he's been better recently. He's not lighting the world on fire by any means, but the OPS is back over 700. He's up to 14 homers, where he was hovering around like 220, 230 for the first 3 to 4 months of the season. So it's been slightly better recently. It's a contract year. It's New York. I think a contract year in New York can go one of two ways. And can go the Soto way, and you can earn yourself a bunch of money, or the pressure can mount up and it can kind of spiral out of control like it has for Gleyber Torres this year. I think once he gets a change of scenery and maybe signs with a good team, I could see Gleyber coming back and rounding into form and being that,
25,
oatmeal-y,
yeah,
second baseman, middle infielder that could provide a lot of value, especially considering I think that his cost will be much, much lower. I think it'll be, this will be a true discount. Maybe the first like deep later round pick.
yeah,
That you'll be able. Like, Torres wasn't drafted that high in
No.
standard 12 teamers, and that and then he was dropped. So he may be like end game fodder for a 12 team league.
Yeah, it feels like it's kind of pick 150 and beyond, because the surface numbers are grim, and then the underlying stats also look bad, where it's just everything has kind of gone in the wrong direction. Like you were saying, where it's like the strikeout rate jumped from 14 up to 20%, the barrel rate dropped, and there wasn't much room for it to drop from 8 down to 6%. A 239 XBA, because his BABIP is actually high, even though he's got a 255 average. So just everything's kind of going the wrong direction this year. But it's, he's not past his prime age wise. It's a good point on the contract here that could just cause for a little bit extra pressing. And yeah, I think it's an MI option. I don't think I'd want to walk away with Glaber as a starting
Sure.
second baseman or something. But yeah, I think it's like you said, it's the first one that feels like it's more in that end game territory, and I think we'll see where the environment is. But I'm with you that there's an option here. My gut says if it's anything before like a pick 150, not interested, but I feel like it would be beyond that. That's usually where we're shopping for pitching as well. It's worth noting. So
Sure.
will be interesting to see if we get any shares of Glaber there. The last one, kind of a WAF name, is Marcus Semien, who is another one that age 34. It's kind of in that same breath as Altuve and Goldschmidt. Granted, Semien hasn't been doing it quite as long as them at that high level, but we've pretty much seen since the COVID season, Semien has been a bona fide all-star. And we saw a down year this year with a 235 average. Beyond that, it's looked passable. 22 homers, 6 steals. It's fine. But we were used to Semien being much more like a 25-20 type of guy. What's nice about Semien is the runs. Even on a season like this, a 235 average, he's still at 95 runs. Always an underrated stat, and like 5x5, and 72 RBIs isn't terrible either. The upside, just looking beneath the hood, is the BABIP plummeted from 291 down to 248. So definitely unlucky, but with that BABIP, it might be related to the fact that his hard hit rate, which he's another guy like Altuve, that he's never been a StatCast guy. His hard hit rate is down this year, and it was already like a 30th percentile down to 17th percentile. It's the lowest it's been in like 5 or 6 years. But the speed is still there. It's just concerning that there's only 6 steals to go with it. So aging guy, hoping for speed, not hitting the ball hard at all. Semien feels like another one that when you go back, just pull it up real quick. Semien went pick 29 overall in March this season. You know, right away, it feels like this is going to be one that's probably close to like the 100 mark. Do we think that we'll be interested in that from a bounce back standpoint?
Where do you think Marcus Semien ranks on the Fangraphs player rater as far as second baseman?
I mean, the runs will probably help, but maybe somewhere between like 9 and 14.
Close. He's 7th.
Okay.
Ketel Marte, Altuve, surprisingly, second most valuable second baseman. Mookie Betts, Spencer Steer, Bryce Terang, Luis Arias, and then Marcus Semien. So
rough,
yeah, it is a tough position for sure, but there's been some value for Marcus Semien. And some soft analysis, but there's a bit of Saberhaven metrics, to quote Gray from Rasball, like an every other year type of thing. For Marcus Semien, WRC plus every other year from 2019, 138, 93, 131, 107, 126, 98. So hey, maybe next year it'll be a 120 or 131 again.
I like it.
Yes, the hard hit rate is concerning because yes, Simeon's not a guy. He is this pull fly ball revolution guy, like his spray chart, all those home runs down the line. He looks for specific pitches that he can pull. And then sprays singles all throughout the field. And when a guy that doesn't have the greatest batted ball metrics loses even more of a hard hit rate, you have a down year like that. And with those seasons, like every other season, like you can see in the good years, his hard hit rate was like 37%, 38%, 40%. In the down years, it's like 33%, 34%, 28% in 2020. I know that's a small sample, but hey, those small bits of balls hit 95 miles an hour or more are going to help your BABIP. And in the years that he performed well, he had like a 260, 270 average. That's because his BABIP was higher because he was hitting the ball harder. So I think it does tie to that. But what I will say is that Marcus Simeon is like the modern day Iron Man. He does
Yeah.
not miss games. He did miss games this year. On May 19th, he collided in the outfield with Adolis Garcia. It was a pretty bad injury, and he did not or collision. He did not miss subsequent games, but he did um, miss a game about a week later on like May 29th, and then sat out again, I believe, on July 4th. And those are the only two games that he's missed, and only the third game that he's missed in the last 3 seasons, or sorry, 4 seasons. It's crazy. The game totals by year since 2019:
Hmm.
159, 162, 53 out of 60, 162, 161, 162, 148. Marcus Simeon has played a ton of baseball. He plays through injury. That's probably why some of those seasons have those dips in hard hit rates, because he plays
Yeah.
hurt. Like some guys would go on the IL. This year, I think he's clearly playing hurt. And despite that, he still put up 22 homers, 6 steals. Yeah, I think you maybe would be lucky to get double digits again, but I think that maybe he can creep up to that 25 homer. Texas should bounce back next year.
Yeah.
I would think 100 runs is, you could take that to the bank. Maybe 80 to 100 RBIs, depending on how good that lineup actually is. And if he does stay healthy, a 260, 270 average, that'll make him much more valuable. And then, hey, give him more opportunities to steal, more opportunities for runs. It's just, I think, sort of how it goes with Simeon. And I think if there is a steep discount, like maybe Altuve, or, not as far as Torres, but because he does have that icy batted ball profile and Statcast lollipops, maybe there'll be a bit of a buying opportunity here for Simeon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just crazy. Like the base running intent, we all know it, but we talk about a guy who like Altuve, who's attempted 28 steals this season. He's 45th percentile sprint speed. Marcus Simeon 80th percentile, and we see like a plummet. So it's just like it's anybody's guess, really. But it is concerning that
it's a team. I think it's definitely a lot of a team
manager
context,
philosophy,
right? Like the Rangers ran wild last year. I think their leader in steals this year is Leody Taveras with 20. And these are guys with some guys that have put up some gaudy speed totals. Like after that, it's like Wyatt Langford, who's played 123 games. He has 15. Then Travis Jankowski in 97 games with 11 steals. So they kind of just did not run this year. Whereas the year before that, if I was correct, Texas or sorry, no, they didn't really run much either. It was 2022. Before Bruce Bochy got there, that they ran a good amount, and I think that was before the rules even changed. So, and that was when Simeon had 25 steals. So, I think a lot of that is team context, and hey, maybe if he's healthier and gets on base a little bit more, there'll be some more opportunities, and it could be like a 10 to 15 steal season again for Simeon.
Yeah. Well, Steve, looking at the list here, because we got Simeon, Torres, Altuve, Austin Riley, Goldschmidt, Adley, Michael Harris. What are like the two that stand out to you as like you just have a hunch that you're going to be getting a lot of shares next year?
It's for me, Altuve and Austin Riley. I think I'm going to be all over those guys next year, and I think I'll dabble in some Gleyber Torres and Simeon too later on.
Okay,
I'll like those guys as second baseman, especially considering how weak the position is.
Yeah, I think that puts me in the Altuve camp as well. Hearing you rattle off those second basemen, it'll be curious to see if there is the discount on Altuve because of like the position scarcity. And you kind of scared me on the Riley thing. Honestly, I kind of feel like Goldschmidt and Michael Harris might have such a sizable drop that I could definitely see me if Goldie is in that like 120 to 140 range, I know I'm going to have a ton of them. And then if Harris is between like round 6 and up, I still think that there's a realistic shot at like 30-20 270.
So you like Harris
pilot.
as your OF2 in like NFBC leagues?
Big time. Yep.
Yeah.
I think so. So we'll see. We'll have to kind of keep special tabs on these guys since we've talked about them, and we're not far away from the earliest of ADP data coming out. But
yeah, it's exciting. This was a fun show. Got the list up one more time. Any other name that you feel like we left out that you wanted to shout out real quick?
Well, I mean, we talked about Braves, and Matt Olson is a big drop.
That's a good one,
especially from
crazy
last year,
the amount of Braves on this
161.
list. Crazy.
Yeah, it really is. Scrolling through, I mean, just such a huge name that really is due for a bounce back, but he's solid anyways. Freddie Freeman, the fact that he just came down to earth somewhat this year, but for the longest time, we looked at Freddie Freeman as like an absolute lock as a top 8 guy. And this year, just the 22 homers. And that we had seen that the power down there, but it usually came with 330 and him just hitting 283 this year. That's another one that jumps out. But what about you? Are there any you're looking at that are?
Yeah, Luis Robert is a big name for me.
That'll be a big.
He's
big
had
faller.
some really good seasons. He was a big faller. Been just a disaster this year. Does have some power and speed, but hasn't really provided much else. Xander Bogaerts right behind him. For the last 3 years, he's at a 133, 119, and a 94 WRC plus. He falls in that Simeon category of a guy that just always posts and always plays hurt. And I think he was doing that this year, and he started to pick it up recently for the Padres. And then Christopher Morel, like another like Gleyber Torres type of thing. Like I've been bound, I forget who it was who came on the show. I think it was Kyle Bland who talked about like Christopher Morel is going to be good. Like everything is good. The process is good. It just didn't happen this year. I still will buy it next year. Like I pounded Christopher Morel as a buy low this year, Gleyber as a buy low this year. I still think in process and it was a good process to buy those guys low. And I think maybe you'll just those will come to fruition next year.
Yeah, from the grab bag, only other final one, because we talked about Altuve and Simeon having that like kind of frosty StatCast sliders. Another one that's always in that group who had kind of a down year this year is Bregman. So I think we'll be looking at discounts for Bregman next year, and I'd be willing to kind of shore up third there. The other thing, just as a small pat on the back, Steve, for WAF, is when we were talking about the strength of schedule episode and saying, look at your Cubbies because they had the easiest runway the rest of the way.
They've been on fire.
We talked about Dansby Swanson a handful of times. And if you look at his splits in July, he had a 578 OPS. And we had that show and said, don't be surprised. August, a 783 OPS with 8 steals, and then September an 822 OPS. So yeah, it's just it's always nice when you see one of our,
there you go,
little recommendations come to fruition there.
Yeah. That's a great shout. They've been a great offense recently.
Suzuki, are you still rostering Suzuki?
Oh yeah. Okay. He's helping me, chip away at this potential. At this matchup and doing the best that he can for this team.
Well, Steve, next time we record, which is still weekly, we'll have the verdict. So we'll be pulling for you on the all-important home league. But for anybody else,
knocking on wood.
Yes, sir. For anybody else still grinding away, got a real shot at winning your leagues. Good luck. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Yeah, this is it, guys. That's the most important thing. Good luck. I know this is championship week for a lot of head-to-head leagues, and I'm right there with you and chatting with you guys in the Discord, rooting you guys on. So I know how rewarding this can be and how stressful this can be this week as well. But good luck out there. Hope you bring it down, and hope that we have played at least a small part in any bit of advice that have helped you guys win, because that's the most rewarding part of doing the show. So Good luck, guys. Thanks for tuning in. It's been a blast all season long. Looking forward to our final regular season show next week.
You said it. Thanks for talking baseball with us, guys.
Thanks, guys. Later.